Imagine opening a map, but instead of Google Earth or a neat paper atlas, you get a wrinkled 3000-year-old scroll written in hieratic squiggles. And somehow it still tells you where the water is. Welcome to the world of ancient Egyptian proto-maps. Papyrus documents that tried to make sense of rivers, quarries, and sacred lands. Long before GPS and long before anyone cared about north being up. Now, before you assume these maps looked like your average road atlas hold-up, these were more like ancient real estate brochures crossed with treasure maps made by people who thought gods literally lived in cliffs. The most famous of these, a dusty, fragile marvel called the Turin Papyrus Map, which may just be the oldest geological map in human history. Yes, a geological map with gold mines. These maps were drawn with meaning, not precision, but even in their faded ink and missing pieces, they tell us one thing. The Egyptians didn't just build pyramids, they also tried to understand the land they built on. So let's roll open the papyrus carefully and dive into the lost geography of ancient Egypt, where every line drawn on parchment had a story, a purpose, and possibly a hidden treasure. Okay, so picture ancient Egypt around 1300 BCE. Pyramids, already old news. Pharaohs, still flexing. Gods everywhere. And geography? Total mystery. Most people back then didn't need a map. Why? Because your life was basically a triangle. Born near the Nile, live near the Nile, die near the Nile. It was Egypt's life source, laundry service, food court, highway, and WhatsApp status all in one. But Egypt was also huge, stretched out like a long, skinny loaf of flatbread. Once you left the comfort zone of the riverbanks, it was all desert, rocks, and rumours of gold. And here's the kicker. People still had to go out there for mining, trade, temples, and occasionally some good old-fashioned grave robbing. But without compasses, satellites, or Google Maps yelling recalculating, how did they get around? Enter the scribes and surveyors, Egypt's ancient nerd squad. They weren't just writing love poems to cats, they were measuring distances with ropes, noting terrain features, and carefully documenting routes to important sites like Wadi Hammamat or the gold mines of Nubia. Some of them even drew what they saw. These drawings weren't maps, the way we see them, but they had roads, landmarks, labels, and sometimes colours to show types of rock. So while most of the world was still drawing stick figures on cave walls, Egypt was producing visual guides to the landscape scribbled in ink on papyrus, stored in temples or royal archives, and completely forgotten. Until archaeologists stumbled upon them centuries later going, wait, is this a map? These weren't fantasy scrolls, they were real tools for real workers in a real empire that needed real directions to find real stuff. Next up, let's get to the star of the show, the map that made Indiana Jones jealous. Our main character today? A ragged, burnt, ancient scroll that looks like someone spilled coffee on a treasure map and then fed it to a goat. Meet the Turin Papyrus Map, unearthed in the 19th century, slept in a museum drawer for decades, and finally recognized for what it was, the oldest known topographical map in human history. That's right, no Europe, no Babylon, no Google Earth, just Egypt flexing first, again. Drawn sometime around 1160 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses IV, this map was made by a scribe named Amenakta, son of Ipui, if you want to get specific. The scroll isn't huge, just under 3 meters long, but what it shows is incredible. It was designed to guide workers to and through the Wadi Hammamat, a rocky desert valley full of valuable stones. Think of it like an ancient construction manual for miners. Go left at the black rock, right at the gold-speckled cliff, and don't annoy the jackal god watching you. But this wasn't just a doodle. It had real features, labelled quarries, shaded mountains, directional markers, and even colour-coded rocks. It literally showed routes, danger zones, settlements, and mines with annotations like gold-bearing mountain, the road that leads to the well, mountain with beckenstone. Oh, and beckenstone. It's like the Egyptian version of marble used for statues, tombs, and probably very heavy regrets when they had to carry it. So you might be thinking, okay, a fancy ancient map, but what's the big deal? It's just a drawing, right? Wrong. This thing is ancient Egypt's Google Earth on scroll mode. Let's break down the flex. First off, it's not symbolic like most ancient maps. It's functional. Real landmarks, real terrain. The map matches the landscape of Wadi Hammamat almost exactly. Geologists have walked the route Amenakta sketched, and get this, the features are actually accurate. It's the Bronze Age equivalent of saying, "Hey, Siri, show me the nearest granite outcrop." Second, this scroll is one of the earliest examples of a geographic document that combines science, utility, and art. It even uses black, red, and pink to distinguish types of stone. That's not just decoration, that's proto-geological coding. Geological coding in 1160 BCE. Bro. Third, it had annotations. A Menacta didn't just draw, you got notes like, this is where the good stuff is. Avoid this spot, it's cursed. Bring extra donkeys, seriously. This map wasn't made for kings or gods. It was made for workers, engineers, architects, the people who needed to get stuff done. It's a project manual, not a religious scroll. In fact, it's so ahead of its time that some scholars call it the world's first thematic map, a map with a purpose, mining. It's not a stretch to say this little papyrus roll helped build temples, tombs, and maybe even the economy. Okay, so the Turin map gets all the fame, but what if I told you there were others? That's right, there's a whole secret club of Egyptian papyri that might have functioned like maps, but today they're mostly destroyed, half missing, or misfiled under meh. Let's talk about a few of these lost treasures. 1. The Fayyum papyri scholars believe that fragments of papyri from the Fayyum region, southwest of Cairo, once described the landscape, canals, lakes and villages in painstaking detail. Some even included what looked like property boundaries or travel instructions between agricultural estates. Think Sim City, but on papyrus, and with a lot more crocodiles. These were less maps and more like geographic manuals designed to help tax collectors, engineers or priests not get lost in the middle of nowhere. Sadly, most of them have turned to confetti thanks to time, tomb robbers and one too many Nile floods. 2. Land surveys on ostraka. Then there's the low-budget version, ostraka, broken pottery shards used like sticky notes. Some have sketches of land plots complete with trees, irrigation ditches and annotations. One even had a sketch of a garden with exact dimensions. Imagine a scribe going, okay, plot A has 6 palm trees and 1 suspiciously angry goose. 3. Temple wall plans. And finally, some maps were so important they were literally carved in stone. At temples like Karnak or Edfu, floor plans and town layouts were inscribed for ritual or administrative use. Basically, the Stone Age version of a city council zoning board. So while only the Turin map survived in full, Egypt probably had an entire mapping tradition, just one that got eaten by time. All right, let's take a step back. We're looking at maps, right? So we assume they're meant to show space where things are. But in ancient Egypt, maps weren't just about where they were, about why. See, Egyptian worldview wasn't like ours. They didn't care about north is up or perfect scale. Their world was full of meaning, not measurements. For example, the Nile didn't flow south to north. It flowed from the gods to the people. Desert to the west, land of the dead. Green fields to the east, life and rebirth. Everything had symbolism, even geography. So when Egyptians made a map, they weren't just saying, go here. They were saying, this mountain matters. This road is sacred. This spot, cursed by Sobek, stay away. It's why some maps put temples front and center or show gods walking beside the road like divine traffic police. These weren't GPS tools, they were cosmic diagrams. Even the Turin map, as practical as it was, follows this mindset. It doesn't just show a quarry, it shows the divine order of the land, where every mine, road and rock fits into a bigger picture of what's right, powerful and sacred. So yeah, Egyptian maps weren't always accurate, but they were right in the way Egyptians understood the universe. Mapping wasn't just navigation, it was philosophy on papyrus. So what happened to Egypt's ancient maps? Short answer, time, fire, flood, dumb luck, and possibly a goat. The vast majority of Egyptian papyri didn't survive. Papyrus is basically the ancient version of cheap printer paper, awesome for writing, terrible for long-term survival. And when you throw in 3,000 years of tomb raiders, collapsing libraries, and people just casually using papyrus scrolls to light fires, well, you get the idea. Even the Turin Papyrus Map, our golden scroll hero, was shredded when it was found. It had to be reassembled like a jigsaw puzzle made of ancient spaghetti. Some pieces are still missing, others may be sitting in the wrong museum box labelled random squiggles. But here's the cool part, even these scraps are changing how we see ancient history. They tell us that Egypt wasn't just building pyramids to impress aliens, they were building infrastructure, organizing labor, managing resources, and even thinking spatially about their empire. These maps show a civilization that tried to document its world not just mythically, but physically, and that's powerful. because it means some of the oldest maps ever made weren't drawn by kings or philosophers, but by project managers, civil engineers, and nerdy scribes with rulers and colored ink. And honestly, that's kind of beautiful. So the next time you open Google Maps and it glitches for 2 seconds, just remember, somewhere in ancient Egypt, a scribe was drawing a road through the desert with a reed pen, a prayer, and a very grumpy donkey. These papyrus maps weren't perfect, but they were powerful. They weren't made for tourists, they were made for builders, for workers, for a civilization that mapped its world with meaning, not just mileage. And though most of them are lost to time, the ones we've found whisper something incredible. We were here, we measured, we mapped, we mattered. If you enjoyed this journey through the forgotten GPS of the pharaohs, hit that like button like you just struck gold in Wadi Hammamat. Subscribe to Infinitia Verity for more mind-blowing history you won't find in textbooks. And tell us in the comments, what ancient mystery should we map next?